Hello everyone, welcome back to Out of Spec Guide. You join me for a update on a really high mileage Tesla. This happens to be a Tesla that is close to me. Specifically, it's my boss Kyle's Tesla. And if you watch other Out of Spec channels, you've no doubt seen this Tesla Model 3 performance through its many miles of life. This one has over 140,000 miles on the odometer. So in this video, my colleague Jordan and I are going to tell you all about this car's story, how it's holding up as a high mileage Tesla. Okay, Jordan, so not only are you the most recent driver of this car, you've piled on a lot of miles in the last few weeks with it.
That's right. When I first met Kyle and this car, I think it had maybe 60,000 miles or less. Now it's at 142,000 miles. I did just get back from a 4,000 mile road trip around the Midwest, so I really got to know the car in its current condition and its range and everything, even the cracked glass, the huge pit in the window, the range or lack thereof.
Let's talk about this initial car. This is a Model 3 Performance. It was 2019 model year, I believe, which was the second year Tesla had the Performance available, third year of Tesla Model 3's life. At this point in time, Tesla was really struggling, as I understand, to make a lot of Model 3s to keep up with demand.
They had kind of the ramp up hell, as they called it, where they were really trying to figure out how to make the car that they promised to a lot of people, which maybe that's still the case with Cybertruck and all that right now. But yes, this is the car that really built up Tesla and actually kind of built up Out of Spec as well. People know this car as BEAK. It's what we called it. It's what Kyle has used to help really fund and start the motoring channel, the road trip channel. And so that's what a lot of videos with this car have been on, but it's also been in so many different reviews videos and even guide videos that you guys all know. But
that's a lot of sentimental value to us.
Yes.
And BEAK, of course, Blue, Ellie, Alyssa, and Kyle, them and the original two dogs. Of course, if they were naming a car now, they'd have to include Walter. But
that's
yes,
true.
This is a really well-traveled Model 3. So when they initially got it, it was an MSRP of around 65 grand. Right now, Jordan, you can get a new Model 3 Performance for 51 grand.
Which is really intriguing. It's not common when car prices go down after the years.
Especially with inflation. Yeah, that is quite something.
The new one is better than this in every way, and it's cheaper, which is crazy.
Yeah, but still, at the time this came out, I mean, 0 to 60 numbers that, of course, embarrassed a lot of the competition. It was really an affordable, performance-oriented sports sedan, which said a lot. But it has had some issues over the years. So let's get the elephant in the room out of the way. Battery degradation. What's the story here?
Yeah, so Kyle measured it a while ago, right after it hit 100,000 miles, a little bit after that. And he did a highway range test and got about 245-ish miles, which he measured to be exactly 10-ish%, just over 10% degradation. At this point, it's probably closer to 15%.
Because it's been another year, another 40,000 miles.
Yeah, and at least a little bit over a year. And so, which is crazy. We've piled so many miles on this car in the last year. It's been like to Florida and back. It's been to California and back.
And we should clarify, not all EV miles, just like any car, are the same, right? These have been hard miles because it's been supercharged a lot.
That's the thing. What we've told you in previous videos, like charging your car at home is much better on the battery. This has been supercharged. I want to say 70% of the miles. At least that's what Kyle looked at last time we had the stats in front of him. Because you can track all this with the whole My Tesla, Tesla 5, whatever it's called.
Yep.
So that's really pretty fascinating because it's held up pretty well. Original battery, over 140,000 miles, even with supercharging and lots of long stints, lots of deep charges to get long stints on road trips. I had to deep charge it quite a bit in this road trip I just did, even just to get between superchargers, because I took it around the Midwest, which is not the best for supercharging.
Yeah, so you were fighting two things, the battery degradation, which of course affects this high mileage car, and then just cold weather, winds, things that would affect any electric car. In terms of like modifications, what's been changed on this, Jordan, this car has also seen quite a few differences, right?
That's right. So I want to mention actually first, about 72,000 miles in, I replaced the upper control arm on the right side. It had a pretty bad squeak, which was kind of a known issue, but of course this car is far outside of the warranty to cover that. We do see now that there's a squeak on this side, so it's probably time to replace this one. It just, there's some noises this car makes that aren't necessarily normal.
Like anything mechanical, the suspension has been through a lot of abuse.
Yeah, so the suspension has also been replaced. It is basically at stock stock factory ride height, but you could lower it if we wanted to. But for winter, it's nice to have it at the kind of increased ride height. These are also aftermarket wheels. These are from our friend Drew's company, Martian Wheels. These are the MW03s, which are kind of, I think, like his OG, or at least early wheel that he made, which has been awesome, but technically a little bit less efficient than the Aero wheels. There's also some under paneling missing from the car, which will affect your Aero as well on the highway. And like Max said, the cold. So there's a lot of factors going against me on that road trip, but still, it did just fine. This car just goes. I'm really glad we're doing deep high mileage testing on it, because a lot of people want to know, how is a high mileage Tesla? And I'm loving that we can just keep telling the story with this one.
Yeah, I mean, this one has been studied to death and used in every kind of scenario. And like you were saying, used on your road trip. So it's getting cold out here. I really do want to get inside soon and talk about what the road trip experience was like for you, how it's held up. But some other things on this specific vehicle. There's been a few cosmetic dings and scratches, one of which I've actually contributed myself in my time driving it, I'm ashamed to say. But you know, it's this car has seen many drivers, many lives, and it's honestly mechanically, like as a, you know, from a drivetrain perspective, held up shockingly well.
Shockingly well, especially with how much Kyle has tracked this thing. Of course, this Model 3 Performance has track mode. It's been abused, but also loved in its own weird way. And I just, yeah, if it can hold up this long under Kyle's ownership, I think most cars are fine.
Yeah. Before we get inside, one thing we should mention, the charging performance on this, in addition to the battery being a bit degraded, I understand the cooling on this is a little bit compromised, meaning theoretically it might not charge as well.
Yes, so there's a coolant valve issue currently that you can see in the service menu, which we could actually look at that in a second. That is affecting the charging in probably hotter weather. I didn't really have any issues with mine. It seemed like it was charging perfectly fine every single time. But when Kyle and Alyssa took it out to Florida last summer, that's when the issue was first popping up, and they noticed a few times where it would like kind of derate itself a little bit. Still not bad. It wasn't like, oh, you're derated to 30 kilowatts. It was more just like limited sometimes.
Yep, and for EV newbies, that just means basically it would charge slower because it had to limit itself. I've noticed too that like even if it does charge normally, it's pretty loud at superchargers. The fans really
go
running
crazy, and once I'm done charging, the fans will go crazy for a long time. I took this back home for Thanksgiving, which was part of my huge road trip, and I had it parked out front after supercharging, and my uncle came in. He's like, you know, the car fan's going. I was like, what? I got here 15 minutes ago. The fan ran for 15 minutes after I parked.
It's like a Ford Focus, where it's like the intercooler has to run for a few minutes after you shut it off.
Exactly.
Let's get inside and talk about how that's holding up. So Tesla's gone through a lot of silent interior updates, actually, believe it or not, in the, you know, what has it been, almost 6-7 years of Model 3's existence. These seats may look like new seats. I mean, aside from the wear, they may look like a similar material. A lot of this has changed. Durability wise, this interior was never super premium. How do you think it's holding up?
Decently well, honestly. Like with how simple it was, they had that going for it. So it's like, it's not that critical if something's like messed up, but also you notice it if it was messed up more. And it's really held up really well. The steering wheel doesn't even look like there's that much wear. The seats don't even have that much wear. There are various scratches on the dash, which could be attributed to dogs or mounting and unmounting cameras. The back, like, I don't know if you can see the door toppers on both sides of the doors. They're really pretty scratched up and beat up by the dogs, especially this one right here. It's like poked to death by dog claws of dogs loving on it. And of course, this had piano black before they got that replaced. And this whole charging thing doesn't really work. It has 3 charging coils, only the bottom one works. None of those USB ports really work. It's just not fully operational, and there's just a lot of, we've tried to keep it a bit clean, but there's just a lot and a lot of people who use this car. So it's kind of like the run around, like almost like the out of spec tractor, where it gets us everywhere we need it to go.
Utility vehicle. We also have this cracked top glass.
It is very cracked all throughout most of the front panel, at least. So that's something I don't actually know how that happened. Do you know?
I don't, before my time, but it's a good thing this isn't a Model X, because that does not entail a windshield replacement. The windshield on this one is fine. Do you know if it's original?
Well, I don't think so, but there's also a huge, right in the sight line of me, there's this huge like divot or whatever.
Yeah.
That's not great.
And that would just be any car, especially living in Colorado. Rocks do happen. You can follow trucks. So honestly, as a vehicle, it's held up well. I will say I feel like the interior, aside from just the piano black and other choices, does feel a little bit more, I don't know, just loose and creaky than the newest Model 3s.
It's interesting. So when Highland was announced and unveiled and is now like starting to roll out
The refreshed new Model 3.
Yeah, the brand new refresh, everyone's like, oh, it's finally fixing all the issues. Actually, I think even newer Model 3s, like 2022, I think was the first year of the major interior, which is not major, but just like noticeable ones, like the phone holders right here being like suede instead of this like weird material. Those felt better built than this. So they have done little upgrades here and there. They just haven't been super loud about it.
Yeah, or like the center console not having the stitching and not having it, get to be as oily and worn. Of course, this one has seen a lot of abuse, but I think the material also is just generally less resilient. I am shocked in general that the structure of these seats has held up.
Yeah, way better than I expected. There's really not a lot of noticeable wear on the seats. And again, these are white seats. Like, look, they look fine. And you can't even tell there's been dogs back there for like 100,000 miles, which is really impressive, especially given the dog. They're not small like dogs that don't slobber. They're big dogs.
Yeah. Yeah, if you've seen Blue and Ellie, they're not small dogs. And then like these seats, you can probably tell, hopefully even with the iPhone camera, that yes, they are discolored as you would expect, but still totally fine. No like huge rips or scratches, which is amazing.
Yep. Here I did pull up the service menus just so we can look at these service alerts. And this coolant valve one is the one we're talking about, where the front vehicle controller detects the coolant valve has encountered a calibration error. So that is just some slight issue. I don't really know. I don't know what this one is. Autopilot inertial, something
Wow.
autopilot.
That's something specific with this hardware, but that's funny and topical because Tesla just had a big autopilot recall today announced. So that's funny.
Yeah. So I don't know. There's a lot. This is where you can check your service alerts, though. Fun fact. Inside the service menu, we can even check our like battery. We could maybe do a whole video on the service menu at some point. So our temperatures are very cold right now. If I went to go supercharge, we'd get very slow speeds. You want that closer to like 50 degrees Celsius.
Yeah, has not been preconditioned at all yet.
Not at all. But yeah, the car is surviving.
Yeah, honestly, holding up really well. People who want really in-depth coverage, like Kyle, you said, did his about a year and change ago, 100,000 mile update. But Jordan, just living with this vehicle on highways, traveling to see family and friends, and your suitcase in this car, really, it was for a few weeks. What has that been like? I mean, how is it on the highways? Is it noisy in here?
It is. So yeah, road noise is actually quite noticeable. Now, some of that could be we are on all-weather tires that are Snow Peak rated. They're Nokians, so not optimized for like highway noise. And I just feel like there's a lot of noise coming from around the cabin, which I think is somewhat normal, especially with the age of this car. So it's noticeable. Yet I am the one who daily drives a Miata, so anything besides that car seems like quiet to me. So this felt quite refined. The suspension's actually set up quite well on this, which I'm pretty thrilled with on the highway. And yeah, it was comfortable, lots of storage space. Honestly, the Model 3 is still one of the best sedans out there, especially when you consider what's considered a compact sedan. You have the frunk, you have the sub-trunk in the trunk, and you have the whole trunk. I was able to pack weeks worth of stuff and even so many extra things without even using the backseat space at all. I could still take passengers. People were still blown away by the acceleration, which at this point is now 5 years old. This car is 5 years old, so it still has the wow factor. The original stats, 3.2 seconds 0 to 60.
Tesla claimed, I think 3.5 seconds is what people have really got.
Yeah, 450 horsepower or so. So really still an impressive car. I'm curious, Max, would you buy one this old? Because we are in this age of where these cars are hitting low values. Like, you can find used Teslas for a pretty good deal, and there's the federal used EV tax credit. So would you buy one this old?
Well, we have seen Model 3 performances go for as low as 25 grand, like some very high mileage early model year examples like this one. And I don't know if I would, just knowing the issues that happen in any vehicle like that. However, that depreciation is real. It just, the new ones, if you're eligible for a tax credit, if you can get one of those, it's fantastic. I mean, the new pricing on a Model 3 Performance is quite something. If you're budget constrained though, I would say, Jordan, my money would be on getting like a 21 or a 2022 Model 3 that, for instance, wouldn't need a retrofit if you were to adapt it to charge in like CCS chargers for road trips, or other kinds of little things. Like we've been talking about the interior upgrades. I feel like 2021, 2022 is really when the Model 3 started to get super ironed out. So I would still probably go in like the $30,000-ish zone to get a lower mileage example. That said, as a vehicle that has had, a single owner and many drivers in its life, I am really impressed with how this has held up. Cosmetically, yeah, it's got its dings and its dents and its scratches, and of course there's battery degradation, but it speaks to Tesla's drivetrain expertise, that it has been really not that bad, especially compared to, our friend Tolik's experience with his Tesla. I don't think it's just luck of the draw. Generally, most of the time, it seems like Teslas hold up really well to high mileage. We're still looking at, what were you getting range-wise, Jordan, on your road trip?
It was about, safely low 200s.
Yeah.
Of course, that was in slightly cooler weather. It wasn't like really cold, but
Yeah.
when it got really cold on the highway, I was still going easily 150 miles between superchargers, which there's plenty of superchargers to deal with. And so that was like 2 hours between charging stops, which was totally fine.
Comfortably able to do that. Originally, of course, people say the EPA rated range on this car was 310 miles. It never met that. It was like 270 miles, really, in real world conditions. So seeing it in the cold and in the real world still do that well, it's still perfectly livable. Honestly, still probably a little more usable range than my much newer Polestar 2.
That's true, yeah. So I think it's a very easily livable car, even with the range and degradation and everything. I wouldn't shy away from a quote-unquote high mileage Tesla, although that's, I guess, depends how high mileage and how has it been used. I mean, this one's been used and maybe abused, you could say, just used heavily, and still holding up great. And that's what I've really learned, is like, if this is looking this good and holding up this well under the intense use of out of spec, I would trust many of them. Of course, some things happen. Of course, our friend Tolik has dealt with some things. There's certain qualms people have had, even with low mileage Teslas, like Model X doors needing to be fixed 3 times before it hits 20,000 miles. That's a thing, but like, I don't know, Model 3 and Model Y are really quite solid.
Yeah. This having seen track days, epic road trips, so much use and abuse, really impressive. Before we close this video off, let's just drive it around your neighborhood a little bit, hear what it sounds like, in terms of squeaks and rattles, because there are a few. Of course, to be fair, like we mentioned, there have been suspension changes on this vehicle. Like you said, oh dear.
There's a couple noises that
The steering rack makes itself known.
I don't know if it picked that up on the microphone, but
I'm pretty sure even on our lav mics, that's going to be picked up.
Yeah, there's some noises, but that's just the steering rack. The actual drivetrain, there's not much, if you can hear it over the steering rack. But
yeah,
it's very smooth.
The motors aren't, clunking or anything. When you
go over certain bumps, you will start to hear. Actually, I'll go this way. You will hear there are some like slight rattles in the interior. Usually I try to avoid bumps, but I'm actually going to look for them this time, but it's really not bad.
Yeah, we just went over a manhole cover and, it's fine. More comfortable, weirdly, than a stock one would be. If someone had a Model 3 Performance from this vintage that they didn't change the suspension on, those were notoriously stiff.
Yeah, this one's impressively soft, and even the sway bars are disconnected right now, I think. So
contributes to that. So yeah, if you had the perfectly factory spec one with more body control, to be fair, it would be a much less comfortable ride.
Yeah, man, some people don't know how to drive out here. All these ICE cars, man.
I know.
But we can get out here and get on it a little bit. The nice drivetrain whine. I love it. I love that it's just pure noise, not this like piped in stuff through the speakers.
The authentic EV experience.
Yep. But it feels pretty great. You really don't have a whole lot of noise and cabin noise until you're at much higher speeds.
Yeah, I would say the NVH is below average. Of course, for the original price of this car, it is older. Model 3 sorted that out later. Newer Model 3s are nicer. The newer refreshed Highland we talked about is nicer still. And yet, the actual drivetrain, all those parts, they're not making themselves that known. Yeah, like there's the normal whine, there's everything, but it's really still pretty quiet in that sense.
Yeah, so I feel like I'm hearing mostly tire noise right now.
Yeah, from the Winners. Yeah.
Yeah, also
and
some of the windshield noise, and of course the newer cars have, I think, a bit more thicker glass panes. Like there's a lot I would like from a newer car, and so I think you have a good point. I would look at probably 21, 22 plus, but I would not shy from a used 21 or 22, even if it had 40, 50,000 miles, because I don't know, if it's been taken care of, then you're probably fine.
Yeah.
And probably most of the early quirks are worked out. A lot of early owners will have their panel gaps fixed by then, if that's a big issue for you. But
I would say this car, though, has had, like, you know, it's been one of the most well-documented Model 3s in the world, right? So many Model 3s you may not know the story behind, and we're not going to go in this video about how to get into service mode and how to do your own battery degradation testing. But if you are on a budget, trying to ball on a budget, and you want the most bang for your buck, these can be great cars to look for, but you really do have to make sure that the battery doesn't have any kind of nasty degradation or things like that, because at this point we are well out of warranty.
Yes, but still works just fine, so we'll just keep driving it. And that's a good point to make. Like, this is one of the most famous Model 3s, and we're not sugarcoating anything. If we have issues, we report them. We're not trying to be this like, oh look, our Tesla's perfect. It's of course had random issues, but ultimately, it's been really quite solid, and we'll keep telling you the story as we unfold it.
Absolutely. More to come on this Model 3 on Out-of-Spec Guide and other channels. Wow, still holds up in acceleration to this day. Really cool stuff. So let us know what you think about that. This Model 3, hopefully it's a good contrast, the Tolix experience. I just wanted to get that on the channel to tell people that, like, you know, it's not necessarily true that you have a high mileage EV and you're going to have all these horror stories about it. In fact, it can, in many ways, I think this has worn better than a comparable combustion car would have.
Good old BEAK.
Good old BEAK, our favorite Model 3 performance. Thanks for joining me for this one, Jordan, and we'll see everyone in another Out-of-Spec Guide video.
Cheers.